Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have you with us today. I'm with Gordon Friesen, Kelsi Sheren, and everyone who else has joined us. There's a few more people joining us late. If you can hear me, it's fine. If you can't, can you hear me? Put up your hand if you hear me. Fine. It's all fine. Perfect. Excellent. So we're going to talk a little bit about a campaign that EPC is going to be starting on, as well as a bit of post-election commentary, because I do think it's sort of a very interesting situation that we're in now that the election has been completed, especially since we've got we have approximately 10 years of having a similar government. So basically speaking, in a very short summary, and I'm going to go into some information with you as to why I'm concerned, obviously, and where we're going to be going with things, is we had an election. We had almost like a very large minority, almost a majority for the Liberals. They're very close to a majority. They're very close. But you have a small number of NDPs. So obviously speaking, you have a situation where both the Liberals and the NDP once again can act as a majority together. I don't expect there to be any issues with this government falling in the next little while. These are just commentaries I'm making because of the fact that the NDP don't have a leader anymore. Obviously speaking, they're not going to do anything but support this government until they have a leader. Because, if you don't have a leader, you can't take the chance of having a government get defeated. So this is where they're at, and this is what's going on right now at the moment. I'm going to talk about my concerns and my issues with you, and then we'll have comments by Gordon and Kelsi. Gordon has specific things he wants to say about our healthcare situation and how this is all coming together. And Kelsi wants to express her concerns, and I love Kelsi's way of expressing her concerns. So we can look forward to that. So I'm going to try and move through my PowerPoint very quickly. Okay. So I've put, this is a lot of my information that you've seen before, some of it you haven't seen before, so we're going to move on. So you know that euthanasia was legalized in Canada in June of 2016. How we did that is we created an exception to homicide in our criminal code. That's how we did it. We also legalized assisted suicide at the same time. It's interesting when you look at the assisted suicide law because you and I are not allowed to aid, abet, or counsel suicide, but if you're a physician or a nurse practitioner, you can do that. So it's a very interesting sort of law how it sits right now. And so when I say to you that the law gave physicians and nurse practitioners the right in law to kill or cause your death, that's correct. That's exactly how it did it. The law was then expanded in March of 2021. Now here's the thing: the original law in 2016, Bill C4, it was 43. Anyway, the original law required that there would be a 5-year review of the law. That was right in the law. There would be a 5-year review. That was a bit of a horse trade that went on during the debate on the original law in 2016. There were quite a few Liberal members of Parliament who weren't completely sure if they were supportive of where things were going. So they said, well, we're going to do a complete 5-year review of the law. It had to start in June of 2020. That review never actually happened. There was never a review of the law. Okay. So what happened is that in March 2021, we expanded the law. Now, it was based on the Truchon court decision, but it was actually much further than Truchon. So if you say, oh, yes, but that was based on a court decision. Well, first of all, Truchon was never appealed. So it was based on a lower court decision in Quebec. So technically, if the federal government had done nothing with it, it would have just ended up as a Quebec decision, right? Or it would have only applied to Quebec. Nonetheless, in March of 2020, we expanded our law by removing the terminal illness requirement from the law for people who are then they created a 2-tier law. I'm going to go into that one second. We removed the 10-day waiting period, which Truchon did not ask for. We also allowed euthanasia for mental illness alone, which was also done at that time, even though that's been now delayed until March of 2027. Now, the other thing about that is they did one other thing with Bill C7, and that was allow euthanasia for people who were incompetent who had been previously approved for it. So if you've been approved for euthanasia and then you, let's say, had a stroke, you can still die by euthanasia. So the other thing that was in Bill C7. But remember, there was no review of the law, okay? And I think that's a very important point to point out. Bill C7 passed. It also created a two-track law, a two-track law. So those who were deemed to be terminally ill, they would have no waiting period because that waiting period was removed. And those who were not considered terminally ill would have a 90-day waiting period. Now remember, terminal illness is defined as having that your natural death is reasonably foreseeable, which is really not defined. So the question is, who then is track 1 and track 2 has become a great mystery in Canada. And in fact, if you look at the data from 2023, you'll notice that the track 1 and track 2 seems to be very confused, because there's a lot of people who appear to be dying as track 1 deaths, meaning that they're considered terminally ill, but who might actually may not be terminally ill. But essentially, a person to be approved for track 2, they must be still 18, they must be suffering. Remember, suffering is completely subjective. The reason I'm saying that is because if I tell you I'm suffering, you can't tell me I'm not suffering, right? It's completely subjective. Nonetheless, essentially a person is required to have an irremediable medical condition. That's what is going on in the law. So you see in the picture, Catherine Frazee, and I'm sorry, I don't recognize this other person with disabilities, but they are saying to the media, etc., why us? And that's by when they created Bill C7, and you have that 2-track, that second track is essentially focused on then MAID, euthanasia for people with disabilities, because what does it mean to have an irremediable medical condition? So essentially, we're talking about people with disabilities. I'll give you some data quickly. So we see the quick increases of the numbers of deaths in Canada since legalization. This is important because the fact is that if you look at other countries that legalize, such as the Netherlands, which the law came into place in 2002, you see that we've had a very fast growth in the number of deaths, very fast. So in 2023, the last year we've got complete data on, there was 15,343 reported assisted deaths, which is a huge number. And I predict that we're going to have, it'll come out to be around 16,500 in 2024. Now I'm saying that based on the Ontario, Quebec, Alberta data, etc. That's where I'm saying that. And Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta represent 75% of the population. Quebec in 2024, it's 6,058. Now, here's the thing. When we're talking about these numbers, there's a problem. My wife always says, why do you talk about numbers? And she's right, because the numbers make it all become a statistic. Individual death, that's where the tragedy rests, on the individual life that died, the individual person. Nonetheless, for a major region, that's the highest in the world at 7.6% of all deaths. Sorry. I'm getting calls and I can't take the calls. So we have this story. I'm going to give you some of the stories. You might remember the story. We had the 23-year-old young man in Ontario. He lived near Toronto. His name is Keanu. He was approved for euthanasia. He was going to die at the MAID house, and it was based on being a diabetic. So he was an insulin-dependent diabetic. His mother actually saved his life, and how she did that was she created a huge media issue around the fact that her son, who was only 23, who was at this point otherwise healthy. So the story, if you remember it, I can tell you very quickly, is during COVID, Keanu became quite depressed. He stopped taking his insulin. He had serious health reactions to that situation. So he did have issues that were quite serious. But at the point of his request for euthanasia now, this is post-COVID, he's actually medically stable. Okay, he is insulin dependent. He was approved for euthanasia. His mother was very, very upset about this because, and if any of you saw that news interview, that W5 interview with him, you'll see him riding his skateboard, Keanu. He actually looked pretty good. Okay, he does look pretty good. Nonetheless, he was insulin dependent, which meant he had an irremediable medical condition. That's what he was approved for. There's a lot more to the story. His mother saved his life. How? She created a petition and she named the doctor who would approve the death and who was planning to do the death. And the doctor decided not to do it. Okay. We have the story of Amir Farsu. Amir, he had a disability. He had serious back issues. He does live today. He's alive today. He was living in St. Catharines at the time. I believe he's still there. What happened is Amir was told he had to move out of his apartment based on the fact that there was a new owner for the apartment and they were going to fix up the building, and he could not find another place to live based on his disability allowance, his disability benefit. Therefore, he went to the doctor and he asked for MAID, euthanasia. He was approved based on his medical condition, but he only asked for it, and he made it quite clear in the interviews, he only asked for it based on he could not live with homelessness. He was helped through a GoFundMe page. He still lives today in an apartment that was people put money in to help find him an apartment. The Veterans Affairs issue, I think this is fundamental. The Veterans Affairs story, we had the first story of the veteran with PTSD who had contacted Veterans Affairs and was told, has he considered MAID, euthanasia? He was quite upset about that. That went to the media, that he was quite angry about it. There was another recent story about veterans who have been told by Veterans Affairs, to consider medical aid in dying for their conditions. So this is not just a one-off situation. But what happened with this story is when that story came out, the Veterans Affairs minister said that it was one bad case. It was one rogue employee. What ended up happening is more stories came out because of that. So you have a situation then that Christine Gauthier was a later story again, a retired Canadian soldier, and she was a Paralympian. She got injured while serving our country, and she was asking for a wheelchair lift, and she was told by Veterans Affairs, "Madam, if you're really so desperate, we can give you medical assistance in dying." Now remember, this actually was quite politically important because of the fact that we all recognize that these people served our country. They should never be treated this way, okay? And you remember, it's sold as choice, autonomy, freedom. Is it freedom, choice, and autonomy when they're telling you should be dead? Story of Catherine Mentler hit in June of 2023. Catherine was actually part of the court case that's been launched by the disability, by several national disability groups to try and strike down our Track 2 part of the law in Canada. But anyway, Catherine was experiencing suicidal ideation. She had gone through that before, so she knew that she was needing to be protected. She went to the Vancouver General Hospital asking for help while she was experiencing suicidal ideation, and she was told by a counselor that there was no available beds for her. So that tells us that Vancouver's got a problem with space for mental health reasons. She was told that the earliest she could see a psychiatrist was November, so it was November 2023. If you think this is June of 2023 when she's gone for help. And then she was told that she considered medically assisted suicide. Now, think about that from a person who's going through suicidal ideation, who's gone to the hospital for protection and has now been told this is an option for her, or she should consider that, or has she considered that? Certainly that's not the way to counsel someone going through suicidal ideation. Medical treatment questions. We've had a whole bunch of medical treatment questions around euthanasia. So the story of Alison DeCluso, that was in Victoria, BC. Alison was diagnosed with abdominal cancer. This is a picture of her on her honeymoon after she received successful treatment at the Institute for Cancer Care at Mercy Medical Center in Baltimore. Anyway, the point was that Alison had an article about her in Victoria, BC, about the fact that she was offered euthanasia rather than treatment. She was told that, with her medical condition, her cancer, the way it was, that they would not be offering her treatment, and that she was told that she could have euthanasia. She was told that she wasn't interested in that. They told her to go home, put everything in order, because there was no treatment for her condition. She had a terminal condition. She instead Googled and found that the Institute for Cancer Care at Mercy Medical Center in Baltimore provides treatment for her condition. She went into full remission. She decided after going into full remission to get married. So that's her in Hawaii on the beach getting married. And the article in the newspaper was about her suing BC Healthcare for the cost of her medical treatment. She was saying, you didn't offer me treatment. I went to Baltimore to receive treatment. I'm now in remission. You didn't give me treatment, therefore you should be paying for it based on our universal healthcare system. So that's what the story was about. Like very quick after that story came out, the story of Mary Griffin hit the media. Mary Griffin was in favor of euthanasia, but she was in Victoria, BC. She died on March 17th, 2023. So in her case, she was referred to an oncologist for, assessment for cancer. The oncologist, it took the oncologist 10 weeks to be able to see Mary. And then the oncologist said, well, sorry, Mary, you had a treatable condition, but it's taken so long, I wish I had seen you earlier, basically, because at this point, does treatment make a lot of sense, is basically what Mary was told. And so instead she died by euthanasia. Then you had the Dan Quayle story. Dan Quayle died on December 5th, 2023. Similar situation, except for Dan was did see his oncologist, was approved for treatment, and then waited and waited and waited and waited in the treatment queue, and instead died on December 5th, 2023 by euthanasia after not receiving any treatment, even though he was approved for treatment and he was waiting for treatment. So once again, these are medical treatment issues leading to euthanasia. So this is the kind of thing we have, and these were all BC stories, but I know that whether you're from Montreal like Gordon, I'm assuming similar things are happening there. We had the Alberta case of the 27-year-old autistic woman, MV. She's still alive today, which is very good. She was approved for euthanasia based on all she had was autism. Now, I have a son who's autistic, so this is and of similar age, my son. And so she was supposed to die on February 1st, 2024. So she was on a 90-day approval because she was not terminally ill. They said that she was approved based on having pain. Okay, she said she was in pain. Okay, the doctor approved her based on an unknown cause of pain. EPC did intervene in the case. This is a situation though where a father brought a case to court based on the fact that he said, my daughter does not have an irremediable medical condition. So now you have a battle over what is approved in Canada. Now, anyway, what was very difficult on this case is the judge had actually decided that they could not prevent the death because the law did not provide any role for the judiciary, judges, to decide whether or not somebody qualified under the law. But the judge did bring up the concerns with Alberta Health and the role of Alberta Health in the decision to approve the euthanasia death. So anyway, very happy that MV is still alive, but this was a case of a woman with autism. Ontario's report. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. I could go through lots of stuff, but actually I might jump through this. In October 2024, the Chief Coroner of Ontario released a report from the Ontario Maid Death Review Committee. So I can't say every province. I know that British Columbia also has a review committee. I know that Quebec obviously has the Quebec Commission. Provinces, not all the provinces have what you call a review committee. Nonetheless, this report came out of the review committee and they looked at the deaths from between 2018 and 2023. So it was a huge number of deaths that they were looking at. And the data show that there was 428 non-compliant euthanasia deaths in Ontario in that period. Now, when I say that, there could have been many more. Now, why could there have been many more? Because of the system of reporting is a self-reporting system. So when Dr. A approves you for euthanasia and nurse practitioner B signs off saying, yes, everything is correct, because it takes 2 signatures to approve a euthanasia death, Dr. A is usually the one who goes ahead and does the death, okay? Dr. A then is required by the rules to send in a report. In Ontario, it goes to the coroner. In Alberta, it goes to Alberta Health, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different ways in each province for reporting. Nonetheless, in Ontario, it goes to the Chief Coroner of Ontario, those reports. Is it possible that some doctors would not answer absolutely honestly about everything if it's a controversial death? Is it just possible? You know, I say that because, you know, I drive down the 401, which is, you know, in Ontario. It's our major highway going, you know, through the major cities pretty much every day. And if I'm speeding on the 401, do I call the police to come pick me up? Like, do I do that? Like, honestly, no, I don't. I know this is even more serious than that, but you know what I'm getting to. It's a self-reporting system. There's no third-party intervention. There's no third-party oversight. The report goes to the review committee. So when you find in a self-reporting system 428 non-compliant euthanasia deaths, that's significant. Just going to go through this case very quickly with you. I'm probably going to jump past the next one because I know that we have other speakers and I've been talking for a long time. Mr. A, this is right from the report. This is absolutely from the report. I've not done anything to this. I've not doctored it in any way. It's a bit long. You see it's all there, hard to read. But anyway, Mr. A was in his late 40s who experienced suffering and functional decline following the 3 vaccinations for SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so this is in the Ontario report. He received multiple consultations with extensive clinical testing completed without determinate diagnostic results, meaning they don't know what's wrong with him. Okay, he's got a reaction to his COVID shots. He was healthy previous to that. Now he's got all these health issues. Amongst his multiple specialists, no unifying diagnosis was confirmed. So you've got no diagnosis is confirmed. He had significant mental health history, including depression and trauma experiences. While navigating his physical symptoms, Mr. A was admitted to hospital with suicidal ideation. Psychiatrists presented concerns of an adjustment disorder, depression with possible psychotic symptoms, and illness anxiety, somatic symptom disorder. During a second occurrence of suicidal ideation, Mr. A was involuntarily hospitalized. During the hospitalization, post-traumatic stress disorder was thought to be significantly contributing to his symptoms. He received inpatient psychiatric treatment and care through a specialist team. He was also diagnosed with cluster B and cluster C personality traits. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I'll be honest, I don't. The main assessor's opinion was that the most reliable diagnosis for Mr. A, and this is right from the report, was severe functional decline, was post-COVID syndrome in keeping with chronic fatigue syndrome, etc. They did an autopsy after his death. So here's a guy who's died by euthanasia. They did an autopsy after his death. Now remember, there are very few autopsies after euthanasia. Very, very few, okay? Very few. No pathological findings were found at the time of his post-mortem examination. So here you have no cause of death and no cause of death found at his, well, they know the cause of death, but I mean, they have no understanding of why he was ill. The cause of death following post-mortem examination was provided as post-COVID-19 vaccine somatic symptom disorder with post-traumatic stress disorder and depressive disorder. Here's a guy who has no medical symptoms. He does not have an irremediable medical condition, but as you know, he is dead, and that's why the report was dealing with this case. Whether his issues were related to psychological issues or some other health concern, Mr. A died by euthanasia without having a known medical condition. This is one of the 428. Now, there was 6 specific cases that were outlined in the report. I know some people from the other side. I read an article from the pro-euthanasia lobby pointing out there's only 6 cases in this. Why they were focusing on 6 cases when there was, so many deaths? Like there's such a low percentage of problems. Now, first of all, these are real people. But secondly, this is 6 out of 420, but these were representative cases, okay? They represented other cases too. Miss B was in her 50s with multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome. She had a history of psychiatric hospital care for depression, anxiety, suicidality, post-traumatic stress disorder related to childhood trauma. So she had a housing issue. She's got multiple chemical sensitivities. When you read the story actually further, you realize she's living in social housing, in a big social housing unit, apartment building, and she was not doing well there. And if you understand someone with multiple chemical sensitivities like she had, a serious case of it, you understand that living in an apartment complex in social housing was probably not the right place for her. Anyway, this is the woman who experienced isolation, that greatly contributed to her suffering, and her requests were made. They pointed out in the report that this was an unacceptable death. Okay, this is just an unacceptable situation. Euthanasia for mental illness. So let's go down to brass tacks. Euthanasia for mental illness is coming into place in our country at this moment as of March 17th, 2027. Will this government continue with that? I don't know, but I do know that most of the people who are reelected were already there, okay, and have already approved this. So anyway, Dr. Sonia Gain testified that it is impossible to predict whether mental illness conditions are irremediable. This is a very important thing, okay? I don't believe in killing anybody. Nonetheless, he's saying you can't prove that these are irremediable conditions, so therefore, how can you say we can prove their deaths, okay? On June 17, 2024, Dying with Dignity and the family of Sam O'Neill launched a charter challenge, claiming that Sam O'Neill's charter rights were infringed when she was transferred from St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver to another medical facility to die by euthanasia. So in this case, Sam O'Neill, her request for euthanasia was fulfilled, but not at St. Paul's Hospital. So what happened is they launched a case in June of 2024 claiming that it's a charter challenge. So it's to force all medical facilities in Canada to provide euthanasia is what this case is about. They chose Sam O'Neill's case. She died in June of 2023. And the first thing that the family did is they launched a pressure campaign against the BC Ministry of Health to force St. Paul's to provide euthanasia. And then in December 2023, the BC Ministry of Health expropriated property from the Catholic Hospital to build a killing center next to St. Paul's. Now, that center opened in January of this year. It's literally inside the courtyard of St. Paul's Hospital. So if you go to St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, you can't see the killing center. But when you walk through the building, you'll notice it has a courtyard in the middle that was left there. They built it at the turn of the century. I mean, the turn of the 20th century. So 1909, I believe, was completed the building. Long time ago, they built it with a courtyard. I guess that would be nice because then if you're on the inside in a room, you could look out the window and there'd be some nice areas to look, not just, look at other windows, right? And so they had a courtyard in the middle. They put this euthanasia center right in the middle of the courtyard, and it's open now. All it does is euthanasia. All it does is kill, does nothing else, and it's in the middle of St. Paul's. So this is what's going on. Parliamentary Committee on MAID, which came out with its report on February 15th, 2023, it said that we should have euthanasia for mature minors. So this is our previous government. We have the same government elected again, though. And we should also have euthanasia by advance request, is what the February 15th, 2023 report. During the deliberations, the committee hearings, Parliamentary Committee on MAID had a presentation received by the Quebec College of Physicians, who said that infant euthanasia, infanticide, should also be permitted. Okay, so let's look at that very quickly. Dr. Louis Roy from the Quebec College of Physicians told the Special Joint Committee on September 7th, 2022, that Canada's federal government should adopt a protocol. He didn't say change the law, he said we should have a protocol to permit infant euthanasia. Dr. Roy suggests that euthanasia of newborns should only be allowed in rare circumstances, such as the newborn who is unlikely to survive. But why did Dr. Roy refer to a protocol? I think it's important. The Netherlands has the Groningen Protocol. The Groningen Protocol was set up based on children born with spina bifida. That's how it was set up. Now, it's not limited to children born with spina bifida, but that's if you read the Groningen Protocol, you realize it's dealing with children born with spina bifida who then have died by euthanasia. That's what the protocol is based on. So just so you know, there has been a study done on the issue of children with spina bifida born in the Netherlands by Rob De Jean, which came out in October 2007, and he said that children with spina bifida, this should never apply to. So even in the case where the protocol was approved for, it should never apply to that. I'm just jumping past this other people. What does a mature minor mean? I think it's important we talk about this quickly. It refers to a person who's under the age of 18 based on an assessment. So you're determined to be a mature minor if the doctor has assessed you and determined that you're capable of making medical decisions. So it's not based on being 14, like they often say, oh, 14 to 18. No. It's based on being assessed. You could be 11 or you could be 15, but it's based on being assessed, and it's determined that you're capable of making medical decisions. Therefore, the distinction of a mature minor is not based on age, but on the ability to consent. So we are talking about children. Now, if someone's determined to be a mature minor, they do not need parental consent. Think about it. A child dying by euthanasia, no parental consent is necessary if they're determined to be a mature minor. A mature minor is treated in every manner as if the person is an adult, because they're deemed to be an adult then, right? Therefore, if a mature minor requests euthanasia, informing the parents would not be required. Okay? In October 10th, 2018, a study was published in the Journal of Medical Ethics. It was the study was done by the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. What did they say? Very important. I wrote a commentary on this. The study concluded that the hospital would respond in the same way as they do with medical treatment issues. That is, if the child is capable of consenting, the child would be able to decide to die by euthanasia with or without parental consent. Okay, I'm going to jump past Peter Singer. He just said it's possible to kill children. So March 21, 2025, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities came out with a report on our euthanasia law in Canada. And sections 19 and 20 of the UN report outline the response to Canada's MAID law. I'm just going to give you the conclusion very quick. Section 20 said, to ensure the right to life of persons with disabilities, the committee recommends that the state party, meaning Canada, in close consultation and active involvement with persons with disabilities through the representative organizations, A, repeal Track 2 MAID. This is from the UN. including the 2027 commencement of Track 2 MAID for persons whose sole underlying medical condition is a medical illness. They said that they're telling the government not to support proposals for expansion of MAID to include mature minors or advanced requests. They want significant investments into people with disabilities, their health care, issues around homelessness, and mental health supports, care services, home care services, personal assistant, employment supports, etc. They wanted to strengthen distinctions, for Indigenous people, non-status, etc. They wanted to establish a federal independent oversight mechanism to monitor, regulate, and handle complaints in relation to MAID, because that's been a problem. So let's say someone has died by euthanasia. How do you actually challenge that? In the case of the man in Calgary, it cost him $250,000 in that lawsuit. $250,000 to save his daughter's life. Well, he was willing to do it because it was his daughter. Establish and resource a federal independent oversight mechanism to monitor, regulate, and handle complaints. Okay, Euthanasia Prevention Coalition supports the Section 20 commitments. Okay, so here we look at the results of the election. 169 seats. So they needed 172 for majority. There's 7 NDP seats, but the NDP does not have a leader. It means that probably for the next at least 18 months minimum, there will be no challenge to this Liberal government. I can't see it. How could you challenge them unless you have a leader in place and you'd be capable of fighting an election? And will the NDP would they be willing to fight another election if they really disagreed with something? We're launching a campaign to demand a full review of Canada's euthanasia law. This has never been done. The campaign will be an online petition campaign, a mail-in postcard campaign. It's oriented to urge the federal government to provide a complete and unbiased review of Canada's MAID law, if it's possible. A review that has never been done. The campaign is based on the March 21, 2025 United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities review of Canada's MAID law. It's also based on the Ontario report from the Chief Coroner of Ontario, stating that there was 428 non-compliant euthanasia deaths in Ontario, and I said there could have been many more. So in my conclusion, here we go. Euthanasia is sold to the culture as enabling personal autonomy and choice. They say it's my body, my choice. We're told that it's for people who are suffering and nearing death. We're told that it's not a form of suicide because people rationally choose to die. And I say this is wrong. It's a lie. I call it the big lie. You hear it enough, you think it's true. You hear it over and over again, you think it's true. These things are either philosophically wrong or not the case. So the biggest question for me is, why are people asking for euthanasia? And most people die by euthanasia. Why? Because they're going through a difficult health condition. They feel depressed and lonely. They're experiencing feelings of hopelessness. They believe their life has lost meaning, purpose, or value. So they have a difficult health condition. I'm not going to argue that in any way. They might be suffering to whatever degree. I'm not sure. Everyone's different. Nonetheless, legalizing euthanasia is not about freedom. It's not about choice. It's not about autonomy. It's about abandonment. These are deaths of despair. The problem is that our reaction to the needs of our individuals is to say we're going to kill them. And I'm going to end there. And I'm going to move to I'm going to move to Kelsi, and then I'm going to move to Gordon. Kelsi is an amazing veteran and someone who is recognizing how these issues are affecting huge numbers of Canadians, and people are just sleeping at the wheel while Canada's killing people.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Alex, for all of that. It's always nice to have another quick overview of what's kind of going on in the country and to take a look, regardless of what you think of the current administration or the last administration. The fact of the matter is, Canada has completely crumbled in its healthcare. I think we can all agree on that. Forget the party. We can all just objectively look at our healthcare system and say it's failed. Canadians, top to bottom. And that is due to several issues, obviously, whether that you want to look at the immigration policy, you want to look at the legislation. But the fact of the matter is, Canada is the bad actor of the world. It is the globe's black spot, black hole where people go to die. And that is the harsh reality. This doesn't come down to the right to die. You've always had the right to die. If you know who I am, you've probably heard me speak on other shows quite aggressively. And I think this is part of the problem. And I've expressed this to Alex before. One of the reasons we have had such a slippery slope is because we are not talking about this as to what it is. right? We have to say this what it is. We are eliminating human beings because the cost is too high to keep them. We are removing our loved ones from their homes because we deem them no longer good enough or a burden on our system. And that is really what it is. It is eugenics in the purest form in the modern era. And the globe is seeing us and looking at us. And I speak all over the globe. I've gone everywhere to every inch. And what I am hearing is, what are you guys doing? And so one of the things I want to bring to people's attention, if they are not cognizant of this, is veterans are being offered this like candy. I have another veteran who is coming on today, and he will be speaking on the show. And I encourage you, if you don't appreciate my language, to just take a listen to yourself and ask yourself, why do I not like the sounds coming at her face? Is it too honest? Is it too abrupt? Or maybe I'm just saying the truth that nobody's been willing to say to all of you for a really long time. You're killing your fellow citizens and you're justifying it. Okay, so we have to look at how we're going to campaign with this differently, because this is no longer targeting just our elderly or the people that are a bit older. They are targeting people like me. I am 35 years old. I served this country. I was injured in Afghanistan, and they have been targeting people like me since I've been in my 20-year-old self. So we have to start approaching it and speaking in the way that people like me are listening. Right? We have to be honest about the generation that this is affecting, not just the older generation or those that are in your 50s and your 60s and your 70s and your 80s. This is targeting young children and people like me. And unfortunately, whether you like it or not, people like me speak this way. Veterans who are being targeted to be killed speak like this. People like me respond to people like me. And there is a reason why, when we do podcasts the way that I do them, the new form of media, the only form of media that is actually getting attention outside of the CBC, which is not state funded, which is independently funded, is getting attention and changing laws. So we have to start asking ourselves, if they're going after the veterans, if they're going after the people who are just lonely with PTSD and with traumas, and now they're targeting children, I guess my question to you is, does it look like the way we've been doing this is working? It's not. So we have to flip it upside down, and we have to start shoving it down their throat, because that's actually what works. Alex knows, after I did Jordan Peterson, we broke the internet. We exposed something that nobody was willing to say, and it was how we were killing people. It was no longer that we were killing people. It was how we were killing people. And as somebody who has been on the other side of what it means to actually take a real life, this is not okay. And it is doing damage to our children, is doing damage to our doctors, is doing damage to any of the individuals who are being asked to go kill those people. And we're not discussing that. We're not discussing what we're asking our healthcare practitioners to do, the moral injury and the moral wound that comes with it. And so this new government, this same government, if you will, is not just looking to expand, they're looking to eradicate. And we have to look at ourselves and go, how are we going to stop this? And in which way can we pivot from the way we've been doing the euthanasia prevention before to change it so that the modern era and people like me will listen? Because that's what it's going to take, right? It's going to take us to come in and say that we can't do this any longer the way we've been doing it, and change it completely. And that will be radically uncomfortable for a lot of you. And that will be radically uncomfortable how we speak, the way we speak, and where we go and how we talk about it. But I do promise you, in my lifetime, we will end it, because it takes radical accountability and it takes intensity to get people and shake Canadians out of this stupor and the Stockholm Syndrome situation they've placed themselves in. So regardless of how you like how I move, it's going to work, because we've seen it work already in the 1 year and 2 year that I've been working in this space. And Alex so graciously has not only given me grace in how I choose to move, but understood that veterans don't all speak like the rest of you. We don't all move like the rest of you, but we do have the connections, the platforms, and the views to get people to wake up from the slumber. So instead of questioning why I speak this way, maybe think outside the box and go, we need to do something a little different to make people move.
Well, there's different ways to speak to different people. It's interesting, because when you brought up how people die,
Yeah.
I was actually just thinking a lot about this morning, because during, I've been doing this work a long time. So during the Supreme Court case, the Carter case that ended up legalizing euthanasia, the argument made by the pro-euthanasia people is that because the argument made by palliative care doctors was you don't need euthanasia. You can properly care for pain and symptoms. And in the worst case scenario, you can put somebody into a sleep. You can, so that therefore you don't have to kill them. They will sleep. They will be put into a sleep. And the argument made by the pro-euthanasia lobby was, well, sometimes they're not put deep enough into a sleep and they're greatly suffering. So they showed studies showing that there's a certain percentage of people who will still suffer because they weren't put deep enough into an anesthesia sleep. But it's the same thing here with how we kill people by euthanasia. You know, we put them in a coma, we put them in a paralysis, and then we shut down their lungs is how we do it.
But when you say shut down the lungs, I want you to be very clear about what that means, though. For people who think that just shut down the lungs, it's not a light switch. It's a pulmonary edemic state where the little tiny sacs in your lungs explode and they fill with blood and you drown to death, and it is akin to waterboarding or death by drowning. And as somebody who's been on the other end of what waterboarding really looks like, just because the body is not moving does not mean that they are not screaming inside. And I stood across from Ellen Wiebe recently at her Salt Spring, where Alicia Duncan and I confronted her, and the disgusting manner in which she spoke about her ability to skate the system, to lie continuously. And she said it openly in a room of over 100 people, how she has broken the law, how she was doing this before it was legal, and how she's proud of it. And she is proud to boast that they only have one more palliative care Catholic facility to shut down. So you have to ask yourself, what are these people saying out loud and what are they saying in private? Because what they're saying in private is not just dark. It shows who they really are. They enjoy killing. And Dr. Christopher Lyon did an incredible paper on the healthcare serial killers. And they discuss the euphoria they get from killing and the need for things like sexual gratification. And the reason that's important is because we have to understand that there are going to be people that will abuse the system and will convince your loved ones and the children, which is even more disgusting, that they should die only because they want to be the one to take their life.
Right. So now we're moving to Gordon. You've got the tail end here, Gordon.
Yes, you can hear me fine?
We can hear you perfect, Gordon.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Gordon Friesen, and I'm, as Alex said, I'm president of the EPC. And I would like to say, first of all, thank you, Alex, for a fantastic update, because all of those of us who oppose euthanasia one way or another, we depend on you for cataloging the information we use for our ammunition. And we always have links that we can go to right away because everything's right there for all of the different events and stories, personal stories. So that's just absolutely wonderful what you've done. And I'd also like to say hello, Kelsi. It's the first time I've met you, and I'm glad to see you with us today. We very much appreciate your reinforcement of our efforts. I mean, you have all the qualities: beautiful, articulate, smart, self-motivated, and incredibly dynamic. So we very much appreciate your reinforcement. Now, speaking first to the question of a call for a review, it was absolutely essential in getting the law passed to promise a review.
That's right.
I mean, it was basically the thing of, this is a no-risk trial with a guaranteed money back. You know, if you're unsatisfied, it's, you know, like on television, send us your money, and perhaps if you don't like it, there's no problem, we'll send it back. Well, it's ridiculous because 5 years later, they've retooled the hospitals in the same way that you retool a manufacturing facility. So it's really, we're very, very far from a situation in which we can go back. And when the so-called review came, all we got was a descriptive blow-off where they told us what was happening, where extreme innovations were treated as unchangeable precedents, what it means to be Canadian. And the rest of the energy, what energy there was given to charting further expansion. There was no putting into question former decisions and former, basically no question of saying, do we like what we did? No, that was gone. Now, moving on to the election, it is interesting to speak about that. And being a Quebecer, I would like to point out that although the Liberals lost standing in the House of Commons, they actually picked up 8 seats in Quebec. So that's perhaps a pretty astounding. Shows that that's going exactly the opposite direction as the tide of the country. And the Liberal government is hence in the pocket of the Quebec caucus, if you will. And this is part of a larger pattern. The federal government has been dancing to the Quebec tune throughout this process. As Alex mentioned earlier, in the Truchon case, which was pivotal towards bringing on the end of life not reasonably foreseeable, the Truchon case was not appealed. It could have been appealed. It should have been appealed. It was against a standing federal law. It was against a decision that had been taken not so long earlier in the House of Commons, in which the legalization had been voted down. It had been the legalization initiative had been defeated recently, and now we have these things going on, and there's not even an appeal. So you can see to what extent the Quebec caucus is pulling the strings on this. And then I would say, okay, the same thing applies to advance requests. It's very obvious that Canada is not going to oppose advance requests, even though in the widening of the law, advance request was refused at the Canadian level. Quebec turns around and says, we want it, and suddenly, oh, now it's back on the table. And I don't think we have any chance. I mean, I'm even more pessimistic.
Well, I didn't mention in my talk that Quebec already has advance requests. They have, in Quebec,
Well,
they've changed the rules to allow for
yes.
that, whereas the rest of Canada still follow the criminal code
Yeah.
saying you can't have it by advance.
And with the Canadian idea of, you know, there's a right and there's a wrong and we're right, okay, having this idea, basically they can't have a difference with Quebec. They have to harmonize with Quebec. It's a principle in Medicare, a harmonization of medical care, which puts the federal government completely at the mercy of any province that does something like that. But especially of Quebec, because you can't stamp down on Quebec because they need Quebec, as I said, to maintain the current power structure. And I'm more pessimistic than Alex with regards to the future of this government. I don't think that a new leader of the NDP will do anything to oppose the Liberals. He will whine about it. He'll stamp his feet. He'll run around, or she'll run around and tell us how horrible the Liberals are. But they will not bring down the Liberal government, because for them, enabling a conservative regime is like just completely unthinkable. So they won't do it. They proved that the first time. They drew out the government as right down the line to the very end of what was possible, whereas they were calling for the end of the government long before. And they'll do the same thing again. So what we have to understand is the true scope of the program of the Quebec model. And there's a lot of things, you know, we've talked about a lot of things. There's one thing that sticks out of my mind right away. It's the long-term care. You know, when we talk about getting rid of embarrassing economic specimens, long-term care is a lot of old folks that we are putting a lot of money into, and there's people who are saying, why? You know, why do we have to keep these people alive? And the way things work in Quebec now is that every institution, every facility has a structure in which they produce basically they're going to produce the most MAID they can. Someone going into long-term care to begin with is, you can say it's a shoe-in for MAID eligibility, because I mean, getting into long-term care is competitive on the basis of need. These people are relatively close to the end of their lives. And if they say, oh, I want MAID, obviously they're going to be qualified. And the idea is that every institution has to have a MAID program, which is compatible with ministerial policy. And that, of course, is maximum MAID. When you come into the institution, the patient and the patient's family have to be informed of that policy. And what the policy basically comes down to is that at any time the patient can make a request, and any staff member who hears that request or thinks that request is possibly made or possibly ready to be made, reports it, kicks it up the line, and the appropriate people come in, and so forth and so on. But the idea is very efficiently, you have the people in the long-term facility, and basically we're waiting for them to, like, toast in the toaster waiting for it to pop up, you know, so that we can kill them, as Kelsi says, it's killing. But the basic idea is that the culture is a culture of anticipation that the people will die by May eventually. And when they come in, I mean, there was a day when DNRs, you know, do not resuscitate, was controversial. Today, DNRs are assumed. I mean, you have to really fight to opt out of a DNR in the hospital these days. Well, the same principle is now being applied to May. Anyway, just to get that across, that's how far it's gone in Quebec, just as an example. But you see, the standard in Quebec has been allowed to stand as a de facto standard also for the rest of Canada. So when Quebec undertakes a war on palliative care homes, knocking them off one after the other until basically there's nothing left, and then you see the same thing happening in British Columbia, somebody in Prince Edward Island, they might think, oh, well, that doesn't concern me. Yes, it does, buddy. It does concern you. Because with the concept of unified healthcare across Canada and harmonization, the idea is that the care is assumed to be the same everywhere. And that leads us, of course, to the one real possibility of fighting back on a political level, which still exists. And that is the fact that other provinces don't have to do it. Other provinces really can have independent policies because healthcare is a provincial competency. And so in the same way that Quebec is able to declare that euthanasia is healthcare and therefore that it's not subject to criminal laws, other provinces can say, okay, maybe Canada legalized it, but that doesn't mean we have to admit it as healthcare. So really, the place that really promises the most payoff for political action right now is at the provincial level, targeting the provincial legislators in the more conservative provinces. And I believe we have a great future in doing that in Alberta, in the Maritimes, in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan. But we got to get we got to get together on this, and we have to identify actual target politicians in the different provinces. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, the point is that this question is not like, I got into this because I felt threatened myself personally back in, well, going all the way back to when I became what I am, which is like now 40 years ago. But at that time, even 40 years ago, there was cultural artifacts about assisted death, and people thought that I became very, very aware that people thought that I should be thinking about that they would, you know, that they thought, they expected me to think about that. And so I felt personally threatened. And I went through a period of that, worrying about euthanasia because of me. And then I became more theoretical, and I started talking about the most vulnerable, like everybody does, you know, the handicapped and so forth. And that was them. You see, we're talking about them. But now I've come to a point, it's not just me and it's not just them. It happens to be all of us, because you see, everybody sooner or later is going to be in the category. So euthanasia really isn't a problem for certain people. Euthanasia is a problem for all people at certain seasons in their lives.
Right. Absolutely.
You know? Like, for instance, Kelsi could hopefully, and we certainly pray that this will be the case, lay her demons and exit the category which are being bombarded with this. But in my opinion, she will not stop advocating for the end of euthanasia, because she will understand that, having been concerned at one point in her life, she will say that, wow, anybody can go through that, and not anybody can, everybody will, eventually, with the normal process of accident and aging and everything that's going on in the world. So it's not me, it's not us, it's not a disabled thing, it's all of us. And then Kelsi she pointed out that it's about the failure of the Canadian healthcare system. Well, that is extremely important, because on a practical level, it's all very fine for us to say we want this or we want that sort of healthcare. When you have a bureaucratic system which is functioning, nothing is more conservative than a bureaucratic system, because once they have something that sort of functions, nobody is going to do anything to change the slightest detail in it. And it just keeps muddling along like that. Well, we're at a point where our healthcare system is making a transition into a death-based veterinarian herd management system. Not a medical system as we understand medicine, but as a veterinary system. And they will patch up people who are temporarily disabled from one reason or another. They will patch them up. They'll get them back out there as productive individuals. But if it comes to the point where the value of their work is less than the value of the money it takes to keep them up, a true utilitarian ethic says that we should put those people down. I mean, a true utilitarian, it's not human at all. It has nothing to do with human. It's anti-human. It's anti-life. It's a big fight.
No, Gordon, as you're saying that, the average person will say, but the doctors aren't going to just do it to you.
Yeah, well,
they're going to convince you that you should do it.
Yeah, well, right away, right off the bat, we found it scandalous that doctors should suggest that to anybody. When we went back, what was it, 5 years ago, we had that lady out in the Maritimes whose daughter, the doctor said that the mother should consider euthanasia for her daughter. And that was a scandal, that a doctor should proactively suggest euthanasia to anybody. Now we're completely used to that. Not only that, but again, coming back to the de facto Quebec standard, it is an obligation on the doctor to speak about euthanasia in certain circumstances. Like anybody who the doctor believes would be eligible for euthanasia, it is an ethical requirement for him to discuss it with the patient. Because you see, the standard of informed consent requires that the patient be aware of their options. And because that is an option, as soon as it's an option, basically it means that somebody like me, if I go in and whine a little bit, complain about how hard my life is, then the doctor is ethically obligated to discuss MAID with me. And this could happen 5 or 10 times a year, So that's a lot of pressure. But there's also the normalization. And this is the thing which, the normalization in our healthcare system, beyond the doctors, forget the doctors, talk about the nurses, talk about the people on the floor in all the different units. Now, these people have become used to seeing MAID, are increasingly becoming used to seeing MAID. A nurse can be on a shift and she's, we call them floats in the hospitals. Like suddenly there's a need for somebody in a certain shift and they call somebody and they come in, boom, they float onto that floor. And then boom, during that shift, they have a MAID procedure to perform. And that nurse comes in. I mean, it's really off the street, change your clothes, go onto the floor and say, okay, prep this guy for death. Now, to be able to do that, you have to make your peace with the whole thing. And you have to believe that it's right, because if you don't believe that it's right, how could you do it? So basically, you rationalize all kinds of things, then it becomes right, then it becomes normal. And once it becomes normal, you begin to resent the patients who tell you that, no, I don't want to do that. That's not normal. Why are you telling me I should be killed? You resent those people. So we're in a situation where non-compliant patients are now in an objectively hostile environment. Now, people would say, oh, that's not true. My father's a doctor. My brother is a doctor. Well, yes, we have a legacy generation of medical professionals, but they are going to be phased out. And in any case, the treatment I receive in hospitals shouldn't be dependent upon the moral compass of individual professionals who are now functioning as dissidents in a hostile environment. So basically, you're looking at a full-on 1984, well, not 1984, take Animal Farm by the same author, but a little bit funnier. You have Boxer. Boxer is the great horse who does all of the work on the Animal Farm. He's the great worker hero, right? Well, Boxer makes everything possible with his strength. But when Boxer suddenly can't work anymore, they send him to the glue factory. I mean, that is the system we're developing. And of course, it has terrible, 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 terrible consequences for human relationships, but they don't care because their theory is anti-human. Okay, so that's our situation. And what we do about this is going to be very complex. I said we have a chance of possibly saving some of this at the provincial level by using their healthcare policy. But to the extent that we can't, if we want to have real medical care, we have to reorganize outside of the system. And that's very, very, very difficult. And strange as it may seem, my hero in this regard is Morgenthaler. Because Morgenthaler did this with abortion, okay? He went outside of the system. He illegally did what he was not allowed to do. He showed that there was a need for it. He showed that there was an economic basis to do it because people wanted it and they were willing to pay for it. I think we're going to have to do the same thing with palliative care. Beginning with palliative care. I know we can't duplicate the entire health industry. People don't have enough money. I mean, basically, they've taken all your money already in taxes. So you don't have the money. But at that particular moment in palliative care, when people are willing to put down $10,000 to go to Australia for a little vacation, well, they could be ready to put down $10,000 to die in a human facility. So I believe that palliative care is a specific place where this could be done. And the point being that if we want to sell a product, that product has to exist. We can talk all about theories and, oh, this is terrible, but we have to, if we don't have an actual service, an actual functioning facility that people can choose to go to, then we can't do anything with it. And on the other hand, when people talk about equity and they say, oh, it's no good because only the rich people could go, well, upper middle class, I'd say yes. However, if we have a service which exists and is widely used, then people can demand access to that service. Whereas if that service does not exist at all, there is no motivation or possibility. So I'm saying we have to look at
the goal of the Delta Hospice Society, as you know, is to create that service. Now, Kelsi has her hand up, Gordon, so I think I should go to her because we've gone over time.
Sorry, there are a couple things. So for people who just want you to understand, I have backdoor meetings often with the current administration. I've sat with the Veterans Affairs Minister of Canada now multiple times in the past 2 months. And just to make you guys all aware, yes, the government is making these laws and these rules, but most of the government doesn't even realize it's happening to its side of its people. Veterans Affairs Minister has admitted to me several times they have told Veterans Affairs to stop offering this, yet they're continuing to offer it. And the one thing we have to take a look at that I think is very important is that there is what is called very similar to, and I'm just using this as the example, so go with me on this. It is very similar to the trans ideology movement, where it is a very cultish ideology, where if you do not participate in said behavior, you are deemed as a pariah from your the people around you, right? And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because if the Veterans Affairs Minister of our country is unaware that this is continuing to happen under his nose, you have to remember that ideology is going to override law. And this is what you're seeing. And the reason we know this is because, again, tomorrow, Alex and I have a whistleblower from British Columbia, nurse, who has stated emphatically, this person did not qualify, yet we were made to kill them anyway. Because to me, this is not euthanasia. This is killing. This is what it is. And this is why we have to say what it is. It's murder, it's killing, it's infanticide, it's not suicide. If you want to go jump, you can go jump, but this is not that. This is targeted killing. And when you have nurses saying, I spoke up, I said this is wrong, I said this is wrong, and then they are pushed out, you have to take a look at what that system is teaching the doctors now, right? If they're teaching and preaching infanticide, and if they're teaching and preaching that you can kill someone quietly, just shut your mouth about it, and that way you don't make noise and become a problem. Because what happens is these doctors are coming to us and saying, Kelsi, they didn't qualify, I didn't want to kill them, they should not have been killed, yet they were killed when I came into my next shift. We have to understand that the morality is not going to follow our law. So just like Gordon said, provinces have the right to say, no, we are not doing this. But this is what happened when you have weak-minded individuals in power. They will not stand up to the status quo and say, no, this is wrong, this is not okay. And if you guys haven't seen it, Alex, I'm sure you have, Gordon, you probably have, WV reached out, and Alex in the Unheard repeated and did an article that his daughter MV is just now waiting for her date to die. She has been qualified again in Alberta, which is, by the way, horrific, because I get photos of this young autistic girl who is 28 years old going to Costco every day, making cakes every day, shopping every day. She is not sick. She does not qualify. Yet Danielle Smith will not step into her province and say that this girl should not be killed under my watch. And so to sit there and say that our government and our people are the ones and the laws that are actually in charge is very dystopian. It's not true. If a doctor wants to kill you and they have their own ideology that they believe in deeply, which is that I have every right to do this and no one will stop me, the reason they do it is because no doctor's heads have rolled yet. And that's why I think, Alex, you've done the petition for Ellen Wiebe. We have to keep pushing on people like her. We have to keep exposing Stephanie Green. We have to look at Maid House in Victoria and Toronto, because these aren't houses, guys. These are killing centers. We have to remember, people will not just go by law. People will do what they deem is moral, and not everyone follows the same morality laws as us. So that was my only other piece, was that Veterans Affairs in Canada has told their own staff to stop doing it. They are not stopping. I have met with the United States State Department as well, with Donald Trump's right-hand man, and he has said emphatically, we had no idea this was even happening. So if their own highest levels of government on both sides of the Western nation are unable to stop it, we have to start relying on the morality of our individuals. And how do we speak to them? How do we get to them to see that what they're doing is wrong and is going to have a long-term repercussion on their life, not just from the individualistic, but what they will have to look themselves in the mirror with every day. And I think it's important that when we do these campaigns and we speak to these people, we don't just tell the stories, we ask them to challenge themselves and say, how would you feel if you had to watch someone's lights go out? How would you sleep? How would you look at your daughter the next day? How would you hug a loved one knowing you took a life that did not qualify to die? Because killing on all fronts is wrong.
Thank you.
Well,
Anyway, go
what?
ahead, Gordon. I think
Well,
we're going to wrap it up.
Well, I was just going to say that I agree with everything that you're saying, and that that's necessary in terms of winning the hearts and minds. But I believe that we have to actually produce real medical care. That's really because if we don't produce real medical care, one way or another, then we're dead in the water. But
100%.
Yeah, no, the normalization of this, we have to watch out. We have to watch out. Our adversaries are very clever at turning what we do. So if we go out, and of course we have to do it, doesn't mean we don't have to do it, but we go out and we say, there was this irregularity, there was this irregularity, there was this irregularity, there was this irregularity, there was this irregularity. Then they will turn around and they say, oh, we'll address those irregularities.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, but there's nothing wrong with the fundamental MAID regime. We're going to address the irregularities. And that is a real serious problem. So we actually have to have, in my opinion, a functioning somewhere where you can go, somewhere where I can go and you can go, where there are doctors who really think like doctors, you know, and who announce that up front And unfortunately, in Canada, that is an extremely difficult thing to do.
Mhm.
But we will do it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions for Kelsi or for Gordon, just send them to info@epcc.ca. Info@epcc.ca. I'll be happy to share it with them. Thank you very much.